For your update. Welcome back. You're working as a QA lead. Okay. So you're into QA with 10 plus years experience in IT industry. You want to be a manager. Very good. Most of us want to become managers or better PMs. Okay. Very good, everyone. So we'll get started. He's a project manager and business analyst as well in an MNC large bank. He manages compliance and projects end to end, including the test lifecycle. Rithi is a BI developer. Ms. Rithi, and Abdul has the same experience as Rajesh, also doing business analysis. Very good. And some of you might be wondering how to use your skills in your work. We'll talk about that later on. Sure, as Abdul have suggested, let me see that, how we can do that best. Okay, then recording is started. Let's get started with today's work, and thank you all again for joining. So today we have got project scope management. We'll take about 2 hours on that. Then afterwards, schedule management or schedule management, another 3 hours. It's a long topic. There's actually one process in schedule management which takes about more than an hour, the schedule development process, out of the 6 processes there. And cost management, we'll do a bit of that, and we'll continue cost on day 3 also, on the morning of day 3. And just like yesterday, we'll do some exam guidance and maybe more quiz questions today. I was looking at your feedbacks, and I felt that a bit more question practice would be good, though the concepts are essential. But I'm thinking of keeping maybe a little brief on the concept and more on the quizzes, so that you get more exam exposure. Also, exam procedures and exam reference materials, I'll cover that, meaning which books you could purchase as a study guides. And yesterday, just to recap on yesterday, this is what we did yesterday. We have done the introduction to the course, then followed by the knowledge areas and process groups, the project environment, the types of organization structures, then the OPA and the EEF, the role of the project manager, particularly the talent triangle, the 3 skills required by the PM. And integration management was done with its 7 processes from start to finish: develop project charter, develop project management plan, direct and manage project work, manage project's knowledge, monitor and control project work, perform integrated change control, and close project. So these are the 7 processes we did. So with that, let's get started with today's stuff. I'm just going to open up today's material, actually. Just give me a moment. Just opening up. Okay, here we are with the project scope management. So giving you all a quick view about scope management. We have got, if you look at processes, there are 6 of them, beginning with the overall planning of scope management. How do we manage the scope? How do we define it? What are the templates for it, scope priorities, and so on? How do we document it? How do we manage changes to the scope? All that comes in this planning document. Based on the plan, we are going to collect the requirements, and based on the requirements, the solution would be defined. So that's known as defining scope, the solution based on the stakeholder requirements. Once we define the scope, the solution, we are going to need to break down the solution into smaller parts. That is a work breakdown structure. And this is where the scope baseline is actually created, the detailed scope definition. And this is the user acceptance of the scope, the validation of scope. Normally the word validation and verification mean other things, but here in the PMI language, validation scope means it's the user acceptance of the deliverables. So please be cautious about that. And eventually we have the controlling of scope, checking the progress of scope from time to time. Are the deliverables ready? Are they delayed? Are there any changes to scope? Those things are handled in controlling of scope. So this is a quick summary. And so I'll get started with some interaction first. Just to understand what is the meaning of scope. What does scope mean? What does requirement mean? How do we move from requirements to scope? So those are some of the initial questions to be answered. So I'm going to write down those things just like yesterday and get started. So let me open up my notepad, WordPad, yeah. And please interact again, like yesterday, on chat. What is the meaning of scope? Sometimes, you know, the word requirement and scope are used synonymously, but they actually mean different things, as far as at least PMI's language is concerned. And the other question is, how do we move or transition from requirements to scope definition? So these are some of the initial questions. Okay, and I know based on industry, each one of you would have your own way of your own terminology, own way of dealing with these things. But let's see the meanings here. Okay, Abdul, I'm reading your comments. Abdul has said requirement is some business need. Scope is something which is feasible and executable in given timelines, like and budget and schedule. Yeah, so that's good. Requirement is definitely a business expected by stakeholders. Yeah? We look at the clearer meaning of scope. A scope which is feasible, yeah, there is an element of feasibility in the scope definition. Kamal has mentioned it's about determining and documenting a list of specific project goals, deliverables, tasks, cost, and deadlines. Yeah. Yes, it's about all the work which is to be done in a project. Cost will be a different matter. It comes under costing. Deadlines will be a different matter. It comes under scheduling. And whereas scope and requirements are very specific, they come in terms of needs. So definitely have to, Kamal, as you mentioned, we need to determine the requirements and the scope and document them with the project goals. Yeah. Project goals overall will be documented in the project charter. And Vritti has mentioned that scope can be a subset of requirements which we agree to deliver. In fact, yes, sometimes all the requirements are not delivered. Some of them is delivered. Yeah? But I'm going to come to the exact meaning of scope very soon. Yeah? And Nadeem has said the scope is like agreement of work you will perform on the requirement. You know, this is a better definition of scope. There is a requirement, and what work will be done to meet that requirement is known as scope. So we are coming closer to that. And Manath has said these are the project goals, features, functions, tasks, deadlines. Yes, the features and functions are definitely part of the requirements or maybe part of the scope. I agree on that. And Kamal has also said requirements are conditions or tasks that must be completed to ensure the success or completion of the project. Yeah, there are definitely some of the things to be met. There are requirements, are the conditions to be met. Yeah, definitely. That's also correct. And Shadab, you said it's we define what is in scope and what is out of scope. That's another good view to understand the scope. And Azaz has said scope is nothing but certain amount of work which needs to be done. So PMI actually defines it this way only. Scope is the work to be done to deliver the goods. And Venkatesh has said scope is the boundary of work. Requirements come within that boundary. So scope defines, you know, what is the work to be done. Definitely it's a boundary, but it is based on the requirements. So we're going to learn shortly that scope is based on the requirements. Very good. And Syed has mentioned that scope is basically an action or a requirement, the subject to the need. A requirement is subject to the need, whereas scope is an action. Yeah, very true. And Abdul has said, has a question actually, Abdul. Project chart, scatter chart and Gantt chart is both the same? Actually, no, both are different. I will come to that eventually, those techniques. So very good. Thanks, people, for all the inputs there. So let's look at the meaning of scope here. So as you see here, scope is the work to be done, and it can be mostly the work to be done is the product scope, because the project delivers something. So that deliverable output is known as the scope. Apart from that, there may be other things like having meeting, audits, project planning, testing, client engagements, procurement. All that is also scope. But the primary scope of a project is the solution which would be delivered to the client based on their requirements. So requirements get translated to scope. And if you look at the total definition of scope, it's everything which is done in a project. But we are going to focus more on the product aspect. Yeah, and Ijaz has all the comment. Requirements are different functionalities that are associated for that amount of work. Yes, that's true. There may be different features, functions, functionalities, technical requirements, and so on, which get translated to scope. So this is project scope management. And in fact, I already told you about the 6 processes there. It's basically the same. We're going to look at the key concepts in a little while when I will show you a picture in how do we deal with agile scoping. How are requirements captured in agile? How is the scoping done in agile as compared to traditional waterfall projects? So no need to read it right now. And therefore here you see the trends at the bottom. The use of business analysis has become a trend. It's been there for the last few years. Business analysts, some of you are already doing it, and which you know, they're basically focus on the requirements gathering. Once the project manager has assigned the business analysis work to the BAs, the business analysts, they're going to go to the field and talk to the requirements, analyze them, prioritize them. They're going to agree on the requirements with the stakeholders, make the requirements documentation. So it's a special area, a special field in itself, because requirements gathering could be quite challenging, because sometimes customers do not specify clearly what they want, or sometimes they may specify too much which cannot be absorbed. So that's why BAs have to work on asking questions, obtaining clarifications, all those things. We won't go too deep into that. It's not in scope. All we have to know that is a business analysis is an emerging trend. It's a separate profession on its own, but it's a PM who is responsible for ensuring that the requirements are captured properly while working with the BAs. So the PM may have to specify to the BAs when to start gathering the requirements, by when the requirement should be signed off and agreed. So that's the story on that. Tailoring, I won't talk much about this. It's basically depends on the nature of the project. How do we want to capture requirements, for example, in agile versus traditional? And agile, one thing about agile, just opening up on that, scope is not understood in the beginning, as we saw yesterday briefly. Scope is not clear. We may approximately know what kind of product we are building, but the customer engages with the project team to discuss the requirements gradually and prioritize the requirements gradually. And as the features are delivered to the customer gradually, the customer, so some experimentation can also be done. The customer provides feedback and says, yeah, I'm happy with this product. They may, for example, if you're building a website for them, they may look at the initial web pages and say that, yeah, these are all good, but can you also add these buttons and so on? Can you modify the colors and so on? So that's how the scoping happens in agile projects. Yeah? So they keep modifying the requirements or adding or removing the requirements based on changing or going towards the product. It is not that they think of building a website and eventually they make an aircraft. That cannot happen. There has to be some vision, some end goal, but an approximate goal. Yeah. That's so you see this prototyping, experimentation, research, discovery, prototypes, those proof of concepts, those things are more popular in agile. So you look at what are these backlog, what is this requirement, and what is a backlog. We look at that shortly. Just briefly, in agile projects, the requirements document is known as a product backlog. You can call it a requirement document, but the common terminology is a product backlog, which is a very dynamic list of requirements, continuously changing. Yeah. Okay, let's move on. I think it's the same there. It's just that the color is a little better now. So therefore, here, if you look at bullet number 2, there's no point in spending too much time in the beginning on defining the scope of an agile project. Start gathering the requirements, put them into a bucket list, start prioritizing what the client wants. If there are 100 items in that bucket list, the product backlog, maybe deliver 15 of them immediately within 2 weeks. And while the customer is adding more things into the bucket list and telling us which ones are priority. So it's like that. So look at that more carefully in a little while. What is a product backlog? How is it done in Agile? This is the first process actually, the planning of scope management. We won't spend much time on this. I would actually request you to study on your own, but on how project scoping should be done. It's about how do we define the scope? Is there any particular template for scope definition? How do we manage changes to scope, right? How do we document the scope? Those are the things which are done in the planning of scope management. So just think about it. How do we create a scope management plan? There have to be some discussions on the templates of the scope definition, discussions on how the scope baseline will look like, how the scope baseline will be modified with a change request. Those are the things which will go into this document. Therefore, we are not trying to define the scope, but only the guidance for scope management. So 2 documents are created, scope and requirements management plan. And it's basically looking at various options. The project charter should be available, which can give us how complex the project is. Depending on the complexity, we may be able to lay out a very simple guidance or a very rigorous guidance for scope and requirements management. The life cycle will definitely impact. If it is agile or waterfall or hybrid will impact these plans, these guidances. Quality of the project can also impact the way we, there may be some quality metrics to be considered when defining the scope management activities. And there may be some organizational templates and industry guidances available. So I'm going to show you an example of a scope management plan that will be, I think, better. So this is a scope management plan. And if I scroll down, look at the table of contents. It's got a scope management approach. Who will be involved? Who are the members who will be involved in scope definition, business analysis? Who will approve the scope? Yeah, who will be involved? Who will analyze and sign off on the requirements document, scope document, and so on? How will it be defined? Are we going to use a what is the step-by-step process? What is the format of the scope statement? What is the format of the work breakdown structure? How the scope will be accepted by the recipients? How the scope changes will be managed. So this is what the scope. So I'm going to show you maybe just some key sections here so that you get an idea. So look at this, for example, roles and responsibilities for scope management. There's a table below. What is the sponsor's role? What is the PM's role? Yeah. Look at all this. Team lead role and all that. Yeah. And similarly, you may have another section. It actually has a template for how the scope statement. We'll look at scope statement in a short while. What is the structure of the scope statement for the project? It has the following sections: scope definition, acceptance criteria, list of deliverables, what is out of scope, are there any other constraints and assumptions? So we look at that with examples afterwards. So here only the structure is defined. We are not actually documenting the scope itself. We have to do step by step. And then there could be a template for the work breakdown structure. We look at what is this WBS as well. Yeah. Oh, sorry. I clicked on something wrong. Yeah. Okay, the screen should be back. Okay, the work breakdown structure template. This is a sample. And once this template is defined, after a while, when the workshops happen for scope definition and all that, then this template will be populated properly. It's basically telling it's a box structure rather than an Excel sheet or a Word document structure. Yeah? That's all. And how the dictionary, the details of the work items, the work packages will be. So we're going to understand all these things today. How the scope will be accepted. You can call it scope verification or validation. PMI uses the word scope validation for user acceptance. How the scope changes will be managed, scope control, that is. How the scope progress will be tracked, meaning how the progress of the deliverables would be tracked. What kind of questions will be asked to track the progress of deliverables. Yeah? So solid preparation before directly jumping into collecting requirements, before directly engaging the BAs, before directly signing off the solution document. Yeah? So that's so more mature approach. So yes, give me a moment. So if you look at how the whole thing is working in product, in scope, this is how the flow is. It's important that you understand the flow, some of the key data flows, process flows for the scope baseline is created. First, the scope planning is done, meaning we are defining the procedures for how scope will be defined, documented, how the requirements will be managed. So these two are the first outputs. Based on these two plans, the requirements will be collected. And then the requirements document will be ready, or in Agile, the product backlog would be ready. There's also this traceability document which will be kept ready. So this will be explained afterwards when we go to the requirements process. Based on the requirements, the scope will be defined. What is the scope definition? What does it mean? It's actually something like this. The product will be defined, the deliverables will be defined, acceptance criteria will be there, and what is not in scope will also be clarified. This is known as the scope definition or the product scope statement. Currently, it is unapproved at this point in time. And then we go to this work breakdown structure process, wherein we have an approved scope baseline. What is the approved scope baseline? We copy this completely here. The first one, the approved project scope statement. If you see above, this is also the project scope statement. Yeah. Sometimes you can call it even product scope statement, that is fine. The second thing is, because we have created a WBS, work breakdown structure, the complete WBS will also be included. And for every element in that work breakdown structure, all the details will be provided. The work breakdown structure, as we will see afterwards, has work packages or work orders, or not tasks, but collection of tasks given to owners. So that's known as a dictionary. As you know, a dictionary is very thick. So dictionary will have complete information about every work package which is being assigned to the owners from the various departments. And once we have all this done, the scope baseline is ready. And once we have the scope baseline ready, this chapter is almost over. That's what we are trying to attempt in the scope management chapter. All that is missing here is the scope control process, which can be triggered anytime. So once again, plan the overall scope management principles and framework, collect the requirements, define the scope based on that using this format. Then based on that format, take the deliverables and break down the deliverables into smaller parts. So essentially what you see here, we actually take the deliverables and start breaking them down into. That's why we have the breakdown structure for the deliverables. So look at examples. Look at the same yesterday's the car navigation system. We'll take a look at that. And with that, I'm coming back to this. Now the question is, how do I remember the techniques? This is where you have to think what should be done to generate these two plans. It's essentially some discussions, meetings, workshops, that's all. So you don't have to really even remember alternatives. There'll be various options discussed on how to manage the scope. That's why we have alternative analysis. Again, it depends on the nature of the project, therefore, and the goals of the project, therefore, we have these things. Okay. So I'm going to move forward, not really go step by step. And as I showed you the scope management plan, let's look at the requirements management plan sample. It focuses more on the requirements rather than scope. requirements management plan. Requirements approach, how do we, for example, what are the steps to gather the requirements? I think the business analysts know that better, though we won't go into those steps right now, but some steps should be defined to manage, to collect the requirements and analyze them, to verify them, meaning sign them off, and then the requirement, that is known as configuration management. Remember from yesterday, how requirements version controlling will be done, how the prioritization of requirements will be done. Then are there any industry standard metrics to be considered, benchmarks to be considered when collecting and analyzing requirements? In software, for example, if I'm building a transaction processing system, we have an industry benchmark that maybe a credit card company should be able to process, let's say, 8 million transactions per second. Yeah? So if I'm going to build a product for credit card system, I mean, you have to use that benchmark, that so many million transactions per second should be possible on credit card systems. Yeah. So product metrics can be referred. Traceability metrics, we look at the meaning of that also and the structure of that also. Not now, but afterwards in a subsequent process. So let me show you some of the sections here. So for example, requirements process, what is the approach? Identify them first, as you see here, analyze them, document them, then ongoing management of requirements, version controlling, and so on. So that's one section. And as I was telling you, configuration management is about version controlling. So you see that here, all that before the version control happens. And there's also a note on the change control process once again. How the requirements will be prioritized. They may have to be different categories of requirements, high priority, medium, low. So this can be defined. And I think those are the key things. Yeah. Any industry metrics which can be used. Oh, sorry, my mistake again. There are some industry benchmarks for requirements in this fiber optics project. And template for a traceability matrix. Yeah? So we look at the templates for the requirement document and traceability afterwards, and I'll explain to you what this is. Not to worry right now. Go step by step, yeah. Otherwise, it'll be quite a lot. Okay, and now that we have gathered our, completed the planning aspects, with this as the basis, the project team will go ahead and collect the requirements, then translate it to a solution. Down the solution into smaller parts, and then start executing the project. So based on some of our initial discussions on requirements versus a scope, let me give you an example here. While you're reading this. Yeah, so if you look at this thing here, very simple example, requirements are basically what stakeholders want. Scope is the work to be done. As many of you mentioned this clearly, the difference between the two. Therefore, if you look at an example, let's say my requirement is that I want to view my mobile plan and my bill. Yeah. Or I may directly tell the project team that I would like to have a website to view my mobile bill. This is the requirement. Look at the solution or the scope of the product. Maybe a simple SMS. I can send a code and receive an SMS to know my bill and plan, or I may receive an email, or I may look at a website. So these are the various, so 3 solutions to a single problem. On the other hand, if the client is asking for a website, then directly we have to give them the website only, not the others. So that's a simple difference between requirements and product scope, at least. But for a lot of terms like this are used: system requirement specification, business requirement specification, system specification document, scope of requirements, SOW sometimes also comes. Yeah, you can use an SOW also. On the other hand, we have a solution document, architecture document, design document. Yeah, not really design, but yeah, some kind of an overall how the product should look like. Yeah, the components of the product at least, and scope document. So this is a lot more clarity now on the difference between the two. Again, stick to your own terminology in your own world. You don't have to suddenly go back and tell people that, oh, this is not the meaning of scope and so on. You know that very well. But you can actually influence people in your organization to understand things more clearly. I've got actually, meanwhile, a question from Venkatesh, and that is, do we capture performance requirements in the requirement documentation? Yes, we should do that. I will come to that now. Let's move on to the next process, which is gathering the requirements, collecting requirements. And now that you have a good idea about the sequence of processes, just once again showing you that. So the next step is to collect and agree on the requirements. And afterwards, the scope needs to be defined. The solution has to be defined. And I think many of you are doing that. Some of you who are also engineers and scientists or whatever, once you have analyzed and gathered the requirements with the help of the BAs, your job may be to use your technical experience or use the technical experts in your team to define the product or the solution or the deliverables. Yeah? Just like the example we saw, the mobile bill example. Therefore, a lot of innovation, science, engineering may have to be used to define the scope or to at least list what we are going to deliver. And afterwards, the breakdown structure, you see this clearly, into work packages. Yeah? And then you know those packages can be assigned to the respective owners for execution. So let's move into the requirements collection process. And once again, let's start with some interaction, collecting requirements or gathering requirements. What happens here? Meaning, how can you go and collect requirements from the stakeholders? And please feel free to share that with me on chat. I'm going to write that question again here. How can requirements be collected? Yeah, very simple question. I have done this through discussions with stakeholders, client discussions, meetings. Yeah? So can you think of those things? Okay, very good. We have a start. Ajaz, thank you. By emails or meeting, definitely. Meetings are important. Discussions. Venkatesh, you have mentioned interviews and brainstorming. Yeah, there needs to be some Q&A sessions, talks between the experts, the technical experts, and the users of a product. Brainstorming for ideas. That's also good input there. Sudarshan, thank you for your input. Asking clients to potential clients to fill in a questionnaire or a customer information summary. That's also very good. Particularly this questionnaire is useful when people are remotely located. You can send a questionnaire to across the globe and put a deadline. For the exam, you have to know these things, when to use a certain technique. So questionnaires are good when we want a response by a deadline and when people are not located nearby. That's when a questionnaire will be good. Kamal has mentioned stories and user acceptance. Very true. The word spiking is also like experimentation or doing some research or prototyping. These are agile terminology. Yes, so what happens in agile is they're trying to discover what to do. Though they may be thinking about an online store, website for an online store, but right now they are trying to do spikes or experiments. They may put a web page, a simple web page, and see how the reaction is to the web page from the users. If the reaction is positive, they're going to add more similar features or better features. If the reaction is not good, they're going to correct the website and make it better. That's how it might work in agile. Yeah, so that's also very good. And Syed has mentioned visiting and analyzation. Yeah, we may have client visits. We may observe. I remember in my case, sometimes I've been to the client site and look at the client's frustrations with their existing environment. And we make notes and come back and we tell them that, sure, you know, we're going to help you improve your operations, improve your environment. Manath has mentioned that meetings and brainstormings are very important, periodically scheduled, reoccurring ones, so that the development team and the stakeholders on the same page. Yeah, the BAs particularly may do, the regular meetings, workshops until everything is finalized. Shadab has mentioned data analysis. Yeah, data analysis can be very useful, particularly in the information world, gathering, looking at statistics, looking at various documents and facts. If you're going to look at building databases and so on, that can be very useful. Booma has mentioned job shadowing. Yeah, job shadowing is like watching someone else do the job and then understanding what problems they are facing. That's and Booma has also mentioned focus groups and workshops. So very good. It's an excellent list. Yeah, focus groups is basically remember more informal sessions, at least in the PMI's approach. You can have subject matter experts, but the sessions do not really conclude much because when you put when you have subject matter experts in a friendly environment, in an informal environment, nothing much will happen. People will only express their opinions. Yeah? But no conclusions might be there. Therefore, we have a formal workshops which are much better, where there is a moderator who can ensure that everybody is contributing and there are conclusions happening. Yeah? So those are good. Okay, with that, let's go and look at, actually many of them are already covered in our process techniques here. And by the way, please remember, collecting requirements is also about analyzing them, which requirements need to be removed, which ones are too heavy, which are beyond this project overall goals, and that also happens here. And in collecting requirements, maybe the requirements are not fully signed off, but they are cleaned up at least. Because when we define the scope in the next process, then at that time, the requirements may get frozen, yeah, frozen. And then we use the frozen requirements to define the scope. Yeah? Otherwise, if we define the scope and again requirements change, then it'll be a problem. So it's two key outputs here, as you can see. The requirements documentation, maybe a collection of documents, and a requirement traceability matrix. We'll take a look at both of them. And we can use the requirements management plan. It'll give us the approach to how to do that, how to analyze and how to gather. Scope management plan, so this is important. And other two important documents, contracts. There may be a contract signed off already with a requirements list. That can be very useful. There could be an SOW attached in the contract. That will be useful. We also look at where is this? The stakeholder register. We look at this on day 4. It's basically capturing stakeholders' expectations. For example, the quality manager could be a stakeholder, and the quality manager expects that ISO 9000 will be followed. So in this stakeholder register, it will be mentioned that this stakeholder expects ISO 9000 to be followed. Therefore, ISO 9000 becomes a requirement here. Yeah, that's how we can use this register. A stakeholder engagement plan is telling us how different stakeholders will be managed. How do we deal with them? It might have, for example, the customer needs to be managed in the following way. Whenever we are dealing with the external customer, we will have a face-to-face meeting. When we collect requirements from the customer, it will not be telephonic, it will be only face-to-face. We will go with a group of people, with our experts, and we will also insist that the customer also bring their users, some of their key users, and the discussion will happen. So those kind of things will be there in the stakeholder engagement plan. Because only when you have that approach clearly defined, then things can be more mature and robust. Otherwise, it's all of a sudden, okay, let's discuss requirements. That may not be a very good approach. So with that, so brainstorming is there, idea generation, interviews, focus groups, questionnaires, looking at various documents like document analysis, data analysis, and all that can come. Taking the votes. Eventually, decision making has to be done to finalize the requirements. Yeah, and workshops. Facilitation is nothing but workshops. And I think in Agile we use spikes or prototypes or experiments, discovery, that is prototyping. We look at some pictures also. And we look at a little bit more on context diagrams. These are use cases, basically user scenarios and use cases. Prototypes, models, 2D, 3D models. Yeah, you might have heard about mockups and wireframe diagrams. Let's look at also how we can visualize. Whenever you look at data representation, it's basically mapping or visualization, graphical visualization, affinity diagrams, mind maps. We look at those two. And finally, we look at, I think, benchmark. Most of you should be knowing benchmark. What is a benchmark, by the way? is some kind of a standard, isn't it? Some reference standard. So we can use standards of other organizations. How are they collecting requirements? And maybe we can use the same approach. So those are okay. Let's look at some visuals and understand the traceability matrix as well. So I'm going really quickly because we already understand all this. We'll focus a little bit on the facilitation. Now we're introduced to 3 types of workshops: joint application development from the IT industry, quality function deployment from the manufacturing and engineering industries, and user stories from the agile industry. Yes, and we look at also the mind maps and affinity diagrams. We look at context diagrams and prototypes, and then we'll be done with this process after that. And once we have gathered the requirements, there should be a list of requirements clearly documented, business requirements, and different terminology can be used. It's not that business requirements are different from stakeholder. There may be overlaps. It's just basically terminology. Business stakeholder requirements, solution requirements, transition requirements, readiness requirements, operational readiness, that is, project requirements, like milestone dates, quality requirements. Look at the number of types of requirements here. So a stakeholder may raise a quality requirement. So you see the overlap of the words. It's not that we can separately classify them. And one thing you notice here, a key thing you may want to know for the exam is these two: functional versus non-functional. Look at the non-functional is the features. Non-functional is, these are the features should be how the features work in different environmental conditions. For example, an automobile may have a speed dial and braking functionality and all that, but we also expect that the performance, the automobile will perform without defects for at least first 10,000 kilometers. So those are the non-functional requirements. There may be safety requirements, security requirements. Yeah, those things are known as non-functional requirements. Of course, if you are making a security product, information security product or something, then definitely those security requirements will be functional requirements. But otherwise, in general, safety, security, performance, those are non-functional. For example, a car should brake even when it rains. So it's taken for granted that the car will brake properly in the rain. So it's a non-functional requirement, but it has to be specified. Okay, looking at some of the questions and chats here. Shadab had this question: is there any difference in stakeholder need and expectation? By the way, I noted the error. Thank you, Venkatesh, also. I think, there are some errors in the title of the slide. This is actually collect requirements slide, not a plan scope management. But you don't have to worry, because the version what you received, which is there in the link what I provided yesterday, the training material, that doesn't have these mistakes at all. Yeah, so that is perfect. So only here, we have to update this. So my apologies for that. Okay. So the question from Sadab was difference in stakeholder need and expectation. I don't think so. These are basically different words: needs, requirements, desires, wants, expectations. As long as everybody understands the terms they are on the same page, it should be okay. But when we come to requirements gathering, when we say stakeholder expectation, an expectation must be that I am the sponsor. Please keep me informed about minor cost issues also. Is it a requirement? Probably not, because it's not a project requirement. It's not a product requirement. It's just a stakeholder's expectation to be kept informed about minor product issues, cost issues. So that's how maybe we can segregate expectations versus requirements. But sometimes expectations can build up and be translated into requirements. A customer might say, I want a really high quality product. Expectation. Then we ask them, what do you mean by high quality? Can you tell us more about it? Then we start documenting and capture them as specific requirements. So that's, I think, hope that answers for Shadab. Okay, so as you see, each process has quite a lot of information there. And once we have the requirements defined, then we can go and define the scope. So let me see if I can go back to my yesterday's example. Just give me a moment. For that automobile example case study, how can we show the requirements? So the same case study where we had the business case in the project charter. Now the requirement document for that automobile, the driver assist system product, you may list various product areas in the requirements documentation, and you may provide details of each requirement. So driving stability is one area, and under driving stability we have traction control, steering support, tire pressure, and all that. Again, there may be many more statements in this under the details. There may be specific dimensions and metrics and clarity on each and everything. Yeah, so that's how. So it could be a very large document, a requirement document. Please do use the templates from that website, projectmanagementdocs.com. They have very good requirements documentation template. And the other point there is not only, and you may have a priority column also here, which requirement is what priority, right? This is too simple a document here. It will be much more elaborate, but we may have to mention who raised this requirement and what is the priority of that. Is it agreed or not? In which release of the product it will be delivered? Is it in the first release or the second release? All those things can also be there in the requirement documentation. Then what is this traceability? Use the traceability matrix. If yes, please do chat and I'll share that with everyone. It's important to also understand where every requirement came from. Did it come from a customer? Did it come from the design team? All those things. It came from a customer. Is it a regulatory requirement? Is it coming from the salespeople? Is it a testing requirement? And so on. Therefore, we need a column for every requirement. What is the origin or the source? So when we track this, it is known as the traceability of a requirement. And also traceability to which deliverable. This requirement, how we can verify the fulfillment of this requirement, sufficient storage space for user data to make sure that this requirement was fulfilled. Someone would have to test the database deliverable. Therefore, we also need another column here, the owner of this test case. So you see at the bottom, other information like acceptance, test case, reference, and its owner will also be specified for each requirement. What is the test case scenario for every requirement? Information security requirement is there. How do we test it? It is traceable to a deliverable known as security engine, and there'll be a test case to check whether this requirement is fulfilled in the security engine. Traceability. So we want to combine the requirement document and the traceability, both of them into single document. That is okay. But it is definitely important to have this document also. This should be signed off with the key stakeholders. Yeah. Customer, project manager, sponsor, whoever, the users, etc., the key users. Otherwise, what happens? The client may say, I never asked you for this requirement. How come we have this I never asked you for a sensor attachment. We can tell them, see, it was a testing requirement from the testing team. That's why we had to add the sensor for serviceability afterwards. And therefore, it need to be signed off with the customer also, so that there are no surprises afterwards. And yeah, Venkatesh, I just noted your chat on the RTM. So that's also covered, requirement traceability. And Kamal, I have noted your chat. And Boma, you actually mentioned traceability matrix maps the requirements from RFP till the end of the project, request for proposal, where the requirement is addressed in each stage. Yeah, that's also good, actually. We're just looking at it little higher level right now. This should be sufficient. We're tracing the source, the origin, and how requirement can be tested. How do we ensure that every requirement is fulfilled? And we can do it in several stages also. So Kamal, I got your point now, the requirements to be mapped with the defects and bugs. Yes, in case the requirement is not fulfilled and it is defective in the product, then we know we may have to double check that requirement or double check the product which was the component in the product which was trying to fulfill that requirement. So it's very useful. Yeah, and I think Bhuma, you said it's frequently used in your organization. Yes. I got this query from Venkatesh. Does the requirement traceability matrix has a unique number assigned to trace it? Any work package number or activity number noted back? Yeah, I'm actually not showing all that. But yes, you need to have a lot more information here. There'll be, we need to mention the requirement ID. You have to mention what is this, if this is a work package, what is this work package ID? Having clear references will be very useful, rather than just having some text. The idea here is to just make you understand the concept, but the actual template you will have to figure out what all you could go. The more references here. There are some few more techniques to be understood before we move on to the next process. So let's do that as well. Just give me a moment. Let's spend another 10 minutes. We need to do the agile one also. Affinity diagrams. This is not a definition of requirements, but we are trying to separate them into different buckets. It's a simple technique. Similar, for example, group 1 might have technical requirements. Group 2 could have security requirements. Group 2 could be safe. 3 could be safety requirements. Group 4 non-functional requirements. So you can categorize them. That's the real purpose of an affinity diagram. Simple grouping. If you actually Google this affinity diagram, then it gives you a complete methodology on how to do the grouping. Yeah? But we won't go into that. It's not required for the PMP exam. As long as we know a little bit about every technique and when to use it, it's good enough for the exam. Mind map, if you have used it, there are some software available. You've got, if you search free software for mind maps, you'll get plenty of them. Essentially, it's a visualized brainstorming. A group of people can brainstorm or have a meeting, and they can put the ideas on different branches and sub branches. So for example, if the meeting is about top exam tips for the PMP exam, then there may be different ideas coming from the people. Then we put the major ideas and then the minor sub ideas on the branches and the sub branches. So it's a pictorial document. It covers various discussion threads which are happening simultaneously during brainstorming and creates a final map. And eventually we can convert this. You may end up with a list of requirements on this map, and we can put it into a proper document and formalize it. There's a technique known as nominal group technique. Brainstorm followed by decision making. Yeah? So nomination, the word nominal means nominate or take votes. So when brainstorm is followed by voting, then it's known as nominal group technique. Let me do a few other techniques before coming to the workshops. Context diagram, I was telling you, these are user scenarios, use cases. So you may have your own graphical version. It needs to be a visual diagram of a stakeholder scenario. We use it a lot in IT, at least when we make software. We ask the client, we discuss with the client and come out with a diagram like this. And eventually we implement this in the form of a product. So it's like an ordering system. It should show interactions between departments, interaction between systems, interaction between people. Yeah? Should all be clearly shown. Prototypes, more popular in Agile. These are show the diagrams first, then create the product. Once we show the diagram, we can take feedback from the client, the users, is this okay or not? Because if we directly make this, there may be, they may say that, sorry, this is not what we wanted. So show like this, show in a different form before the final product. Okay, and let's do the workshops, the facilitation techniques. Let me come to that. There are basically 3 techniques we are going to learn quickly, not go too deep. facilitation or workshop-based techniques. In Agile, this one has been in place since a few years, joint application development, wherein the users from the customer side, they directly work with the project team, with the developers, with the designers and developers. It's not that the project management deals with the users and client, but the users directly deal with the developers. That's known as joint application development. So as long as you know this concept, it's good enough for the exam. So this is there in the PMBOK guide. Another one which is used in the industry quite a lot, particularly in manufacturing and engineering, is this QFD, quality function deployment. I don't know if any of you have used it. You don't have to really look at this house of quality. It looks like a house. It's called house of quality. More important that you understand the bottom part here. Quality function deployment focuses on defining the requirements, or sometimes even defining the scope, the solution, based on the critical requirements. So aerospace, for example, they have critical safety requirements. Yeah. So therefore, they heavily use this QFD approach. And innovation, when we do innovation, then QFD is very valuable. Voice of the customer, VOC, is also listened to. And before we, in order to create an innovative product, so as long as you know these three things, it's good enough. Yeah. But how we do the QFD approach in a workshop is a different thing altogether. Yeah. This is not there in the PMBOK guide. I've just taken it from another text on a Six Sigma textbook. Okay, I've got a query from Ejaz. Users, I mean the POs directly interact with developers. The product owner directly interact with developers. Yes. So what happens is in Agile we will see the product owner who is representing the customer or the users will directly work with the developers, the software developers, and tell them what is required. And the developers will work with that product owner to prioritize together which are the priority items. In fact, how the JAD concept came up was in IBM in the 1970s. The healthcare industry came to IBM, some from a healthcare company, and they wanted some software to be developed. And there was some challenge in understanding the requirements of the healthcare people, like the doctors and the nurses. So what happened was the IBMers taught the healthcare people to write software. So the doctors and nurses quickly wrote some software and showed the technical people what they wanted. And with that understanding, then the IBM team went ahead and developed the complete software. So as you saw, the users and the technical team have worked together jointly for a short period to understand and demonstrate some features or a prototype. So that's the meaning there. Yeah. And we look at, we won't go too deep into Agile, but we look at a few more things, some minimum things required to know for the PMBOK. Agile questions are very few, very basic. And the last thing is, some of you who are into Agile might recognize these things, user stories. That's how Agile world works. Instead of calling them requirements, they call them user stories. There are different roles. User could be not the user from the client side. It could be a technical user also. It could be from the project team also. Look at this example here. It's an airline booking system. And if you want to buy a plane ticket, it's like a large, it's a deliver. You might call it as a deliverable in the traditional language. Buying a plane ticket, there'll be a software written for buying a plane ticket. So it's one deliverable. But that deliverable is made up of several stories, user stories. These are like functionalities, smaller functionalities. Search by city. If you have to search by city is one functionality. Search by date is another functionality. Search for flights, that is. Search by price, yeah, and complex search. Then there is another user story for paying by credit card. For pay by online check and so on. So you see each small functionality is written in the form of a user story. Look at the user story below here. As a user, I should be able to search flights and decide which one I need. So user should be written very clearly. It should tell the role here, user, manager, administrator, or those examples, and I should be able to do something and benefit something or achieve something. So 3 sections: who, what to be done, and what is the benefit of that. So such a list of user stories in an agile project is called a product backlog. So, and they don't write requirements in the traditional language. They write in the form of these user stories in agile. So as long as you know this, it's good enough for you don't even have to know the syntax for the PMP exam. All you have to know is the user story is a language which is used in the agile world. Okay, so let me. And now that you understand the product backlog, let's look at this one. This is the last to be understood on agile here. Then we move on to the next process. So there is a product backlog, which is a list of requirements in an agile project. As I was telling you, it will be written in the form of user stories. There could be hundreds of user stories here. And this is very dynamic. There is a role known as product owner who is representing the customer basically, is coming from the customer side or represents the customer from any party. And this person works closely with the technical people, the development people, particularly for software. And this product owner who is representing customer will prioritize these stories. He or she will tell the team members which ones are priority. If there are hundreds of them here, he or she may pick up 20 of them and say, please deliver these 20 in the first sprint. So the development team goes ahead and then commits. They will tell the product owner, sorry, we cannot deliver these 20 because it is too much of workload for the 2 weeks. Give us only 15 because our velocity is currently averaging 15. Yeah? They will track their velocity from the previous sprints. First sprint, they will not know the velocity. Yeah, it may be difficult. But anyway, we won't go into all that. That will come in an agile course, not in the PMP course. But once the prioritized set of user stories are decided for the first sprint, a small product is delivered. And the customer will be given that product for use immediately. While the customer is using that product, the product owner prioritizes some more user stories and gives it to the development team. Development team will again decide whether to commit them or not. And because the time is limited, the time is fixed. In a project, you may fix the release, the sprint or the phase or iteration for maybe 1 week, 2 weeks, or maybe 3 or 4 weeks. So once you decide it should be 2 weeks, throughout the project, it can be only 2 weeks per sprint. We cannot change 2 weeks for one sprint, second sprint is 1 week, third sprint is 3 weeks. That doesn't happen. So that's how we do the execution. And the interesting part is this user story list is very dynamic. They may be added, modified, or removed anytime by the product owner during the project. Therefore, how can you really baseline the scope? In Agile, it may be impossible to baseline the scope. Therefore, it's like a high-level baselining could be done. Approximately, this is the scope. You know, it's like the mountain. We know that we are building a mountain. In a traditional project, we have to know what are the rocks in the mountain and what are the smaller gravels or stones in the mountain. But in Agile project, we may not know we may know the mountain and the rocks, big rocks, but we may not know the smaller sand grains and the smaller gravel and the stones. That's why we can define the smaller sand and the gravel stones only when we come to a specific sprint, not in the beginning. They have other roles like Scrum Master as a coach for this process, and the PM is just a servant leader. Yeah? PM focuses more on development of people rather than being an authority figure. Authority doesn't work because the development team is empowered, as you noticed. They are the ones who are deciding and committing. They are the ones who tell the product owner, we will tell you what we can deliver. Tell us what you want, but we will tell you what we can deliver. That's how the discussion goes. Yeah? Of course, they can't say no to the customer, but they can tell the customer, sorry, we can't do 25 features or stories in this sprint. We can do only 20 for you. So tell us which are those priority 20. Again, they may decide based on the total effort. It could be 15 or 20 because they look at the total effort also. Yeah? Some user stories may be complicated. Some user stories may be easy ones. Yeah? So, okay. So this methodology, what we will see in scheduling today, I even covered it. We already covered one scheduling topic. This is known as iterative scheduling with a backlog. There is a product backlog and we are doing multiple iterations or sprints. Therefore, it's known as iterative scheduling with a backlog. This approach is used in Agile. There are other approaches used in Agile like Kanban. We'll look at Kanban this afternoon. Another approach in Agile, though it comes from operations, from manufacturing. We'll see that. Yeah? Okay, so that finishes off the requirements. Yes, I'm noting the comment on the break. We are actually, we're going to do a break in 10 minutes. It's 10:20, 10:30 is the first break scheduled. So events in a sprint. Also, you have to know this. These are mentioned very lightly in the PMBOK guide. So when we enter a single sprint, on the day one, there is a sprint planning. Let's say this is a 2-week sprint. Yeah, 2 weeks. The product backlog has hundreds of items. So on the day one, they decide which items will go into the sprint as part of the sprint plan. They will look at the effort estimates and all that and see, okay, out of the 100, we'll pick up about 20 and do in this 2 weeks time frame. At the end of, and every day they have a stand-up meeting. And there are some rules actually on the timings of these meetings. I won't go into all that. There are very strict policies around how long should be these meetings. This is like a 15-minute daily meeting, very quick meeting on daily progress checks. And there's a specific agenda here, daily scrum or a stand-up. People will stand. At the end of it, there is a sprint review. A review includes a demonstration of the product and a feedback from the users. Positive, negative, all kinds of feedback. And corrections will be made in case there are defects so that they can move on to the next one properly. But the sprint cannot be extended. We can't say there are defects, therefore I need 2 more days. No, it will go to the next sprint if it cannot be fixed by the end of that day. Retrospective is a lessons learned meeting at the end of the sprint. And it continues again and again. So that finishes off our collecting requirements. Just want to pause here for any questions. And what I want to do before the break, I want to finish off one more process. It's a quick one actually. So let's do that also in the next less than 10 minutes. Just give me a moment. While you have any other questions. Yeah, I noted your comment. Sprint grooming is also an event in a sprint. Yeah, I actually didn't go into all that. It's just a PMP high level approach. Yeah, but thank you. There will be sprint grooming. They look at what features should go and defining the features clearly, triaging and all, they do that. Yeah? So, okay, very good. Defining scope, just a quick process. Let's finish this off in the next less than 10 minutes and take a break after that. Now the question to all of you is, once the requirements are clear, how do we translate that into a technical product definition? I don't know what methodologies you might have used to convert the raw requirements or the agreed requirements into product definition. The same example, I would like to see my mobile bill is a requirement, and the solution is I may get a website to log in, or I may get an SMS or an email to check my mobile bill. So what can be done? And in this process, the scope is finalized. The deliverables are finalized. The assumptions will be seen here. The deliverables and the acceptance criteria will be finalized so that afterwards we can break down the deliverables into smaller parts. So all the deliverables should be finalized here in defined scope. And while you are chatting me how to translate the scope, the requirement into a solution or a technical solution or a scope product definition, I'll show you what all we have here. We have the project scope statement as a key output. That's the terminology used by PMI, a scope statement. And therefore, naturally, we need the requirements here as an input. Without the requirements, we cannot define the scope. That's the most important input. And in the middle box is the secret key to. In my case, sometimes I worked with telecom companies. They would say, we would like to have a single-click billing system. Currently, the user has to log in, then click a button, click another button, scroll down, click one more button, and then they can pay the bill. So client told us, after login, I want to click only one button and pay my bill. So for that, we have to create a huge number of systems. We have to bring in about 3,000 systems and install hardware, the software. Application has to be loaded and upgraded, modified. The software has to be modified and then loaded and tested. And once everything was tested and ready, we told the customer, please log in and check it for yourself. And they logged in, they could click a button and the bill could be paid. But see the amount of work to be done for that. So therefore, we had all the deliverables. Me and my project team had to identify what are the deliverables before the customer could do single-click billing. So deliverables were like defining, upgrading the application, and having some processes by which the way the user logs in and selects something, change that process, and defining what hardware systems need to be purchased, what software to be installed on them, the operating systems, and so on. These were separate deliverables, and each of these deliverables were assigned to different team members. Yeah? So this definition is known as a project scope statement. Therefore, a lot of scientific thinking, some workshops, some meetings, product breakdowns has to be done. There'll be some product breakdown, product analysis, systems engineering, value engineering, scientific analysis, out-of-box thinking, parallel thinking. All these creative approaches may be used for defining the product. This is nothing but a product definition. So this is the most important. Therefore, various alternatives would be thought about when doing the product analysis. You can again use the joint application development, user stories workshop, quality function deployment as well. And during this process, the requirements might get modified or corrected a little bit. Traceability might get corrected. Yeah? So the core of this is the product analysis. Okay, so let us see what is in store. Just spend another 2 more minutes and we'll be done with this. Product analysis, as I was telling you, breakdown, systems engineering, requirements analysis, value engineering, all these terms are used in the industry. Look at an example shortly. And as I was telling you, we have got the scope statement as the key output, project or product scope statement. It'll have the definition of the product, the deliverables in the product, acceptance criteria for the product, what is out of scope to be very clear, because there may be exclusions which may be delivered maybe in another project or another phase of the project. Yeah? You can modify this for phase 2, and then whatever was excluded can be brought into scope. That's why we have this section. Yeah? So let's look at our 2 examples. One, we look at the automobile engineering, that one. So now we have the business case, the project charter, the project plan, then the requirements documentation. Based on the requirement documentation, the scope statement has been prepared. What is the product? Normally this can be like a 2 or 3 page or whatever. It need not be so small. Product description, based on the requirements, it's been proposed to provide a driver assistance system to facilitate automated assistance to the vehicle drivers in various ways. Deliverables, these are the key all the deliverables of the product. Parking assistant, object detection assistant, intersection assistant, and blah, blah, blah. Acceptance criteria. Integration of all modules should be successful for the high priority interfaces. There may be some high priority items here. All high priority requirements of all modules should be satisfied. Out of scope, display of technical parameters related to the above modules in the dashboard. Dashboard will not display many parameters in the car. Yeah? So it's a small document, And that's how we can do the scope statement of a product. And the key thing here is the list of deliverables, because without this, we cannot execute the work. So when we come back after the break, we're going to look at deliverable section more closely and create a work breakdown structure so that the execution can start. And just one more thing before I look into, I was actually mentioning the product analysis. Let's look at product analysis as well. That's the key technique there. As you see this, normally companies have their own designers and subject matter experts. They may look at various aspects of a product. First of all, they look at the functionality of the product. They will brainstorm on this. They'll also have to look at the costing of the product, market cost versus their price. Yeah? In what environment will the product be used? For example, mobile phones. Yeah? Different companies create different mobile phones. All of us have the same requirements mostly, but look at Apple versus Oppo versus whatever other companies, yeah? HTC and Moto and so on. All of them have different specifications, and so they actually do a product analysis to eventually create a product. So therefore, the requirements may be the same, but eventually the product is different slightly. What materials to be used, thickness of the glass, how many megapixels may be there, specified by a user. I would like 25 megapixels, but the product team will decide which camera should be used. It's a Zeiss camera or some other camera, yeah? So that's what is known as product analysis. And they can do this by using various approaches in the industry, like product breakdown, requirements analysis, systems, value, and so on. These are all engineering and design techniques. The word value is important. I'd like to ask you people, what is this meaning of value? How can we use the concept of value analysis in engineering when defining a solution? Any example in particular? I'd like to hear about some example. How you can create value in a product. And once we do that, we are ready for the break. Okay, so value basically, it depends on the client's perception of value. Some clients may perceive higher quality as a value. Some clients may perceive a cost as a value, low cost at a value. But in general, value means more for less. Can I get more for less payment? When I buy cell phones, I look at models from in the market. I will look at which is cheaper for the same features and same quality. So that gives me more value. So value could be things like higher productivity, doing the project with less resources, energy savings in a electronic product or a transportation product. Value could be like a driverless vehicle. We are saving the cost of the driver in a driverless vehicle. So those things are known as value additions, which can be difficult, right? Providing value. Yes, people, thank you. I'm seeing some good responses, very similar responses. Syed has said adding features, yeah, more features for the same price, that is. And Mohammad Farhan, having good quality, yeah, definitely. Quality is seen as a value. And Kamal has said product value is the benefit that a customer gets by using a product to satisfy her needs minus associated costs. Yeah. So it's about the output minus input. What is the overall net benefit? And Ijaz has said completing the project before time and less budget. Yes, so money saving is definitely a value. Doing it early can be a value for some customer. And here, what we are doing here, particularly the concept of value, is for the product only. Yeah? Overall project value could be about saving time and money, but product value is also about creating a product which is less expensive with more features. So that's how we can conclude. Very good. Thanks for all those awesome inputs. And with that, I think we are in good condition to have a break. I just want to just take a quick feedback before we go away for the short 15-minute break, so that I know how everyone is doing. At least like to hear from some of you. How are things so far? Hope some of you have learned something new, or you see in this case study, the automobile, look at one of the user stories for this system. As a driver, I should be able to receive maneuvering messages from the system when parking my car in tiny, sufficient spaces so that I can park quickly and conveniently. This is how a requirement is specified in an agile project. You can do a quality check on the user story. There are some mechanisms to do quality checks. Okay, so yes, I got started getting comments. I won't name the people, but thank you for the comments which are coming in. Lot of information, good learnings. Okay, thank you, messages.